All right, looks like we're up and running here, recording. So I hope everybody's doing well. I'm happy to be back at School of the East. So let's look forward to getting into some World Civilization 2. So this quarter, just to let you know, in one we did all the major ones, all the Greek empires and the Aztec Empire and things like that. So this time we're going to do some other things. We're going to get into some Islam. We're going to get into India, and other things that aren't widely covered a lot here in the West. But again, this is world civilizations. So we got to cover all these different things, right? Maybe some China, things like that, right? So hopefully you'll find these stories and information on each country also interesting, okay? All right. So without further ado, let me see if I still know how to do this. Share the screen, maybe. Okay. Right. So I got to get myself out of here. Take myself down here. Yeah. Hello. Let's go down to the bottom. Hiding. Okay. We go to the slideshow. And from the beginning. All right. Maybe I got to push this down a little bit more. So just moving. Week 1. Yes, week 1. And if I look at my trusty calendar, this is scheduled for the 12th of July. Okay, so I hope you guys had a good 4th of July, stayed safe, So anyway, let's get into this world history, some more different countries and enjoy it, okay? Okay. So this week is classical India. This should be interesting. Love Indian food. Love Indian clothes. Can I say Indian women are attractive? I better not. I don't want to get in trouble. Okay. So here we go. Following the decline of the Mauryan Empire, hopefully I said that correctly, India's frontier defenses, which means out in the country, were critically weakened. Consequently, by the way of the Indus Valley and the Punjab, and with almost no impediments mean some kind of stopping or problems. Persians, Seleucid Greeks, which is a certain division of Greeks, and various steppe, which means open area, like Mongolia has a steppe, land groups subjected India to frequent predations, which means Persians and these Greeks frequently attacked India and tried to invade them. So India had to deal with these folks. Among the latter were the Kushan, a wandering people, which is a phrase for nomads. The word is nomad, where people just get up and move, and anytime that they feel the need, they don't have a permanent home. Who had been driven from their Turkestan homelands by another more warlike group, the Xiongnu, which says Xiongnu. Might be some Chinese influence there. Forced into a westward migration, the Kushan arrived in northwestern India between 165 and 128 BCE and set about extending control over a large region that included what is today Pakistan and Afghanistan. So they were taking large areas, these Kushan folks. With additional conquests or victories, eventually their empire reached from the Aral Sea through the Indus Valley and eastward over most of northern India. That's pretty rough. Again, the Indians had to deal with all kinds of folks as the years went by trying to invade. The Kushan Empire, long-distance trade, and the Buddhist community. Recent archaeological research with additional documentation gleaned, which means taken, from coins and inscriptions, that's where they got their information. There was no books. Has produced critical evidence that ties the Kushan Empire and its greatest emperor, Kanishka the Great, and there you see 78 to 125 CE, to the expansion of Buddhism and long-distance trade. An important ingredient of this was the Fourth Buddhist Council, one that settled important doctrinal. So, I like to read these little side notes. I don't necessarily test you on these. It's just an overview of information. Okay, so 50 to 300, Kushan Empire, and then Kanishka the Great came in at 100 to 125. Ajanta caves, constructed and painted. These are very famous in India. The Gupta dynasty. I've met a lot of Indian men and their name was Gupta, so they're probably named after this fellow, if not related. I might have met some royalty. 406, arrival of Foxian in India. 480, onward, India divided between north and south, and we'll go into that a little bit. 500 to 800, formative period of caste system. We'll also touch a little on the caste system. 711, Muslims begin to invade northwestern India. Then we have 700 to 1000, Hindu revival, which means it comes back, gains popularity again years later from the original time, and they invade northwestern India. I'm sorry, Hindu revival and the decline of Buddhism in India. So you get one religion starts becoming popular again, and the present one maybe starts declining. And then late 1100s to 1400s, Delhi Sultanate in northern India. Sultanate is like a Muslim king, right? You've heard the word sultan, right? So his headquarters is the Sultanate. Okay, so I have one question on this first page. So let me see what we can do here. And go to the whiteboard. Get the pencil. Okay, it looks like this first week you're going to get lucky again. I'm going to ask these long questions and you're going to give short answers. So I got to do most of the work, but I think you'd like that, right? Okay, so Kanishka the Great, we just spoke about him. Expanded what during his time in India? So give you a little hint, has to do with religion. So I'll give you a minute or two to answer that. I said, I hope everybody's doing great. I don't know what you guys are thinking about this heat wave that's running through. These heat waves are really rough. People love the sunshine in LA, but when we have heat waves, it's like, what are we doing here? Okay, so you probably got that. That's not a long answer. Like I said, my questions are long, the answers are short. So again, repeating one, Kanishka the Great expanded what during his time in India? And my hint to you is think about religion. That should give you the answer, okay? So let me get the eraser. Okay, that's gone, okay? Let's go back here. Back to the material. Oops, did I? No, okay. Be a good boy. I don't want to confuse anybody. previous. Okay, this is where we were. We went down here, and now we'll move on. Okay, so these issues which took place under Kanishka's aegis or reign, Kanishka also managed to extend control over the strategically crucial oases. So oasis is like a desert area, a desert oasis, and monasteries of the Tarim Basin through which the Silk Road, the famous Silk Road, passed. When considered together, these facts suggest why Kanishka's reign, at the time that he spent as king, and his successors coincided, which means happened at the same time, with a major push of Buddhism out of its spaces in the Punjab and Kashmir eastwards along the Silk routes to China. Buddhist traditions regard him and Ashoka as its greatest patrons. Wow, pretty high level positions in Buddhism. Continuing, the expansion of Buddhism that occurred under the patronage of Kushan rulers created Asia's earliest community of discourse. So it says, see the introduction of part 2. So the community of discourse is open talking, without really arguing, you just discuss things. Along with the growing tempo of trade, cultural exchanges increased across most of Central and Eastern Asia. In its early centuries, Kushan Buddhists were able to accompany the caravans, which means, your horses, your people, your camels, your goods, all going together because there was no train, no buses. So they're all traveling together. So the caravans to Luoyang and Nanjing, which we know are in China, where they translated sacred text into Chinese and made the first Chinese converts, or people that became their followers. In later centuries, Chinese pilgrims like Fa Xian and Xuanzang, 1629 to 644, made their return journey to visit shrines, study and debate, and access scriptures in their original language. Kanishka minted gold coins on which he placed images of the Buddha, a monk, and the Bodhisattva. Well, here's going to be a tough one for me. Avalokitesvara for Bodhisattva. Okay, coins were essential to pilgrims and to merchants of the long distance trade. So the combination of these particular elements hints into elegantly at the interplay between Mahayana Buddhism and the Asian commerce or business that existed in the early centuries CE. So there we go, people mixing, selling, buying, trading, doing things. Buddhism, at least until the Gupta era, proved to be more adaptable than the Brahmanism to the needs of trading community. So this was better for the community, at least as far as goods and services. Buddhism helped facilitate usury and capital investment in trade. Monastic communities conveniently located sanghas, which are monasteries, at strategic points along the trade routes. These provided shelter and safety equally to religious or commercial travelers. In many instances, it could be both. Most intriguing, perhaps, was a development of the Bodhisattva. Here we go again, Avalokitesvara, as a kind of savior to travelers and seafarers, so people who traveled by sea. His image appeared everywhere trade and Buddhism spread, and the dating of the images acts almost as a chronology of these developments, okay? So it says here at the bottom here, right? Gold coin of Kanishka, so this is Kanishka right here. The only surviving images we have of Kanishka, so no paintings, no drawings, are from coins he minted. Okay. And as he's passed along the roads, his image was spread throughout the Silk Road. So Interesting stuff, huh? Okay. I have a question on this page. Let me grab that pencil. This will be question 2. So, Kushan. Okay, so Kushan Buddhists made conversions of which people, which group, which ethnic group of people. So if they're going east, that's a big hint, right? Silk Road. They're not coming to United States or Mexico. So I'll give you a few to answer that. Okay, you should have a grab on that. So again, repeating, Kushan Buddhists made conversions of which people, which ethnic group of people. So grab the eraser. That's done. Okay, back to the material. Okay, so we ended here at the bottom discussing the coin of Kanishka. So we move on. Now we enter the Gupta dynasty. Yes. For nearly 500 years, Buddhism had flourished or succeeded, extremely succeeded, with the patronage of Mauryan and Kushan rulers. So during their time, Buddhism just was the #1 religion. Beginning with the Gupta dynasty in 320, however, India experienced a great rebirth of Hindu culture. The caste system assured everyone a definite place in society, and political affairs were in the hands of strong, effective rulers for a century and a half, so 150 years. Vedic Hindu religious belief responded to the challenge of Buddhism and reformed so effectively that it began to supplant or replace Buddhism in the country. Indian merchants and immigrants carried Hindu theology and Sanskrit literature to Southeast Asia, where they merged with native religions and cultures. Long after the political unity under the Guptas ended, India continued to produce scientific advances and technological developments that are still not fully recognized in the West. The invasion of Muslim Turks and others from the Northwest redivided India into political fragments, but the essential unity of its Hindu civilization carried on. The Gupta period is the first in Indian history for which more or less reliable firsthand accounts have survived. So remember, I spoke earlier, there was no pictures or documentation, drawings of Kanishka, but he was on the coins. Now this is a different time, years later, many, many years later. So now we have firsthand accounts, reliable. So the most interesting is that of a Chinese Buddhist monk, Fa Xian. He was one of the first Chinese Buddhist monks who traveled the Silk Road seeking manuscripts or documents and opportunities to debate other scholars in the birthplace of the Buddha himself. He visited India around 406 and left a diary of what he saw and did. So there's a first-hand account written down. According to his account, India was a stable society, well ruled by a king who was universally respected because he brought prosperity or, success and order everywhere. Nevertheless, despite such sources, we know relatively little about Gupta, India, compared with what we know of other world civilizations of this date. Indians did not begin to keep historical records until very late. So aside from works such as Vazian's, the main written materials we have are religious poetry and folklore. Even these sources are sparse, which means few, for the tradition of both Hinduism and Buddhism was not literary, which means not written down, but oral. It was an oral tradition. What was important was memorized generation after generation, but inevitably with some changes. It was not written down until much later, and then only in a much altered version. Okay, so I have a question on this page. Good old Gupta. He's my buddy. So be question 3. Okay, it's going to be a long one, but your answer will be short. Oops. Yeah, easy peasy. You can answer this quickly. So when was the great rebirth of Hinduism in India? I just touched on this subject, so go ahead, I'll give you some time. When was this, approximately? Okay, think you got a hold on that one? All right, so again, repeating, when was the great rebirth of Hinduism in India? Please don't tell me something like 1970. I know I still got my funny guys in this class, so don't tell me something like that. Or, oh, I think it was last week, teacher, during 4th of July. No. Okay, so eraser. Right. Back to the material. All right, so we ended here at the bottom with the Gupta dynasty. And then here's a nice picture, the Buddhist community, 100 to 600 CE. All right, so it's just talking about refreshment and what have you. So in this circle here, again, we're talking about the community of discourse. And Buddhist monasteries provided places of aid, help, and refreshment, food and drink for merchants, business people, and pilgrims like Fazian. So he was taken care of on this route. Okay, very nice. Look at that. Persia, India, Java, which is Indonesia, Japan, Korea. Wow, interesting, very interesting. And it continues a little bit here. Political fragmentation. Fragmentation means things that break off into different pieces in the south and the north. And that's what happened in India. You'll see a division of different things in the south and of the north. After the demise or the fall of the Gupta dynasty, India divided into political and cultural regions, south and north. So again, my funny guys, if I ask you a question like that on the midterm, what political cultural regions did India divide in after the Gupta dynasty? Don't tell me east and west. Okay, it's right here, south and north. So each of these regions further subdivided, some more divisions, into several units ruled by hereditary, which means if I'm the king, we don't choose who's next. It's going to be my son, okay? Or aristocratic leaders, but each region shared some common features, distinguishing each from the other, okay? Again, this is just further showing you how the trade started during the Gupta Empire, so we don't have to go over that again. Okay, so now we're going to get into Hinduism and Buddhism. Okay. Below the Deccan Plateau, peoples whose languages came from the Dravidian and Pali families, quite different from those of the north, inhabited or lived in the south. The South's political history is almost unknown for several centuries, as it was never brought under direct Gupta rule and few written records have survived. There you go again. When you have societies that for thousands of years are just oral, it's not good. Where other societies had, I mean, the early Egyptians, you know, they wrote on papyrus paper, so they have documents and things that can show you what was going on. The invasions that were perennially racked the north, which means very, very frequently, had little effect on the south, whose contacts with foreigners were in the nature of peaceful commerce, both east and west over the Indian Ocean. So the south had peaceful merchants come there, where the north was, you know, invaded a lot by Muslims and you name it, wanderers. From the Gupta period onward, little common political bond existed between the two regions, meaning the north and south, for many centuries. The culture of the South was strongly influenced by varieties of Hinduism, and particularly Buddhism, which differed from the Mahayana version flavored in the North. Theravada, Hinayana Buddhism became dominant in the South and in Southeast Asia, especially Java, Indonesia. That's why we showed you that on the map. There, Theravada holy men in monasteries who had arrived with merchants from southern India and Sri Lanka were instrumental in the conversion of much of Southeast Asia. The Theravada devotees tended to look down on the relatively flexible doctrines of the Mahayana supporters or adherents and rejected many as unworthy or inauthentic. The South saw a great flourishing or growing of both Buddhist and Hindu architecture and sculpture between 300 and 700 CE. Both religions encouraged the construction of massive stone stupas, rounded temples that stood in the midst, which means in the middle, of extensive complexes that served both for worship and living quarters. In the interior stood statues of gods and goddesses in all types of holy shrines. Sculpture, mainly in stone, but also in bronze, seems to have been the art form of choice among Hindus during most of their history. Some of their life-size and larger than life-size works have survived to demonstrate the artist's skills. Even more impressive are the many panels and figures that decorate the exteriors of the stupa temples and show us the vigor and the life-affirming nature of Hindu art. Much of it was, now let me see how far I'm going to go on that. I guess I can read a little bit. Okay, yeah, we can do that. And then I'll get into the questions. I might even throw you an extra one. Get ready. Yeah, so I'll read down to here, then I'll start the questions. So much of this art was erotic, which I guess that means sexual. I don't know. Yeah, it does. And created, that's why you have the Kama Sutra, the book of different positions, right? They're very famous. Some people don't know anything about India except that. That's very sad, but anyway. So this created a great deal of embarrassment among 19th century British colonial observers because they were a very tight-lipped society and did not express any outward emotion, let alone anything sexual. So when they saw these kinds of shrines and statues, I don't know if they fainted or ran away. I don't know what they did. What would have been considered pornographic in a modern Western context apparently had no such connotations to peoples whose cultures were agrarian or farmers, and for whom sexuality and fertility were both inseparable and essential to plant and animal life. So what they're trying to say here is that the Indian people at the time, they didn't do what, let's say, Western people did. They go, okay, the sexuality is keep it in the bedroom. There's no lights at the time. There's candles. So turn off the candles and don't talk about it. And that's how it is. But these people were such a part of the Indian people were such a part of the land and the fertility of the land, the ability to grow crops and what have you, that they found that inseparable from their own human fertility and animals also. It's just part of a cycle. What's wrong with it? So it's a difference there, clash of cultures. Some painting also has survived, most notably in the Ajanta caves in the south. Like most architecture and sculpture of India's golden age, all paintings were inspired by religious legends and stories, much as medieval European artworks were. The paintings portray God's good and bad, and all sorts of quasi, which means almost divine demons, taken from rich religious folklore. Okay, so before I get into the Islam, I have some questions to ask, and let me see here. I might have skipped a question, trying to be too kind to my students, right? Let's see here. Yeah, I think I skipped. There was one on Gupta, so let me make sure. I want you as prepared as possible. It's an easy one, yeah. Throw it in there. So go here. Okay, so this will be question 4. Let me get that pencil. So was one I skipped over for Gupta, but it's really easy. You just supply the one sentence answer. Okay, so I might have to, this might sound a little slippery, this question, so let me make sure I can explain it. Basically, here it is. The Gupta period, which the time frame of the Guptas, right, which how many hundreds of years in India, was the first to have actual what? So if that's throwing you off, what I mean to say here is, I told you, I made mention of the Egyptians the early Egyptians and the papyrus, right? So India had a tradition, not like the Egyptians, not writing things on papyrus, but an oral tradition. But during the Gupta period, now we add actual what happening that we have to this day during that time, okay? So go ahead, yourself on that. Okay, now, okay, I promise you that's it with the Gupta, okay? So what we just finished going over was about the division now, right? Division of India. So the last Gupta question. Went through the political fragmentation. Okay. So let me ask you a question there. Get it over here. Right. Easy peasy. Okay. The later South India, remember there's a division, there's a difference in their influences. The later South India was strongly influenced by what? Again, don't you guys, like if Temujin's back, don't give me that silly stuff. Oh, they were influenced by McDonald's and the rock and roll. No. Okay, that stuff didn't exist back then. So let me give you a minute to write that down. It should be short and sweet, not a long answer. Okay, you think you got a hold of that? Are you sure? All right, so let me grab the eraser and repeat. All right, the Gupta period in India was the first to have an actual what? What was actually done? And this is for the benefit of the society, at least for future generations. Okay. 5, the later South India was strongly influenced by what? What were its influences? Just tell me the couple and we should be fine. Right? All right, so let me erase these. 4 is gone. 5 is gone. Okay. Going back to the material. Okay. Now, we have to get into the north. Okay. North, Islam comes to India. We have a good deal more political and military data from the north of India than from the south. During the 700 years between the fall of the Gupta dynasty and the erection or building of the Muslim Sultanate, again, that I guess you can call it the palace of the Sultan in Delhi. The major question facing all northern Indian rulers was how to defend themselves against the repeated and ever fiercer or stronger assaults coming from Muslim forces out of Afghanistan on the northwestern frontier. From the 8th century onward, bands of Muslim raiders and would-be conquerors of the Hindu and the Buddhist areas had harassed northwestern India. Right, again, the poor north, due to their geographical location, just have to constantly deal with people's trying to invade. The first wave of conquests of the 7th century had carried Islam only as far as northwestern India, reaching the Indus Valley and Multan in 711, and no farther. For another 3 centuries, 300 years, Hindu dynasties in central India proved sufficiently vigorous or strong to discourage further invasion. By the early 11th century, the military balance of power had shifted dramatically, however. Oh, it doesn't sound good. A strong regime had been established in Afghanistan, meaning a Muslim regime. Its military power rested on highly trained and mobile professional slave troops of Turkish origins, for whom the riches of India beckoned or called like ripe fruit. They could not resist the beauties and traditions and things of India, so they had to invade. Between 1001 and 1030, their warlord Mahmud al-Ghazni launched powerful raids into northwest India for the purpose not of empire building, so not to say, hey, I want to extend my empire, but of seizing booty. So booty means treasure. It's an old word that means treasure. So we want your diamonds, your gold, your jewelry, your temples. We want them all. One raid against the temple of Shiva in Gujarat, Mahmud reportedly carried off 3,000 pounds of gold. See? There you go. That's what they wanted. Yet the effects of these first raids hardly outlived Mahmud's death in 1030. And for another 165 years, Islamic rule fragmented. So we already went over fragmentation. By the late 1100s, effective Islamic control had shrunk to the region of the Punjab area only. So they backed them off, put them in a smaller area. After a second wave of invasions beginning in 1192, Muslim commanders made their headquarters in the city of Delhi, which then became the capital of what came to be called Delhi Sultanate. Additional conquests were directed eastward as far as Bengal until most of the northern and central India fell to Muslim arms, which means weapons. Okay, I have a question in there. All right. Easy peasy one. Question 6. fresh out of the lecture, easy peasy. Okay, here we go, freshie. Who conquered the Hindus and Buddhists in northern India? That should be easy peasy. Let me give you a minute there. Okay, you think you got a hold on that? I hope so. Okie dokie. Let me get the eraser and repeat this. Who conquered the Hindus and Buddhists in northern India? Okay. So let's not hear anything like, oh, I think it was the Nazis, right? Hitler invaded. No. Okay. So let me erase this. Try to go back to the material. Okay, we went down here until most of northern and central India fell to Muslim arms. Okay. The Sultanate lasted for another 3 centuries, so another 300 years. And in that long span, the patterns of Muslim-Hindu relations were cast or set or made. Muslim intolerance, which means they would not put up with people that were not Muslim. They considered pagan or devil worshippers, meant that violence from raids and counter raids was the keynote of these relations from the beginning. So they felt, hey, we can do this because we think you guys are evil. Successful raids and victories frequently led to exceedingly high losses of life for Hindus and Buddhists. Very sad, defending their temples, monasteries, and homes. Mahmud's reign on the temple of Shiva was followed by a slaughter, which means when you killed a large number of people. 50,000 Brahmins or high caste Hindus. Is that a lot of people? I'll let you decide. So culturally speaking, the contacts between Islamic and native Indian civilizations were important. Beginning as early as the 800s, many Muslim merchants visited the west coast of India. Some other travel accounts survive, which means they wrote them down, and are important sources of Indian history. So many resident Muslims lived in some of the coastal towns as to justify building mosques. In addition to carrying cotton, silks, and fine steel swords from India to the world of Islam, these merchant traders and other Muslim visitors took back the Indians' knowledge of algebra and astronomy and other cultural achievements. Indian visitors went to Harun al-Rashid's Baghdad to train Islamic scholars at the request of the Caliph. When Harun fell seriously ill, an Indian physician, who was then rewarded with the post of royal physician, cured him. Okay, so I like to go into these sidebars here. Frescoes, which means it's a form of painting, at the Ajanta Caves, so right here. The Ajanta Caves complex was begun sometime in the early 2nd century BCE and completed in 478 CE. Originally a Hindu project, it became a Buddhist retreat, and the hundreds of fresco sculptures that grace it are mainly representative of the Buddhist belief. The picture shows a multitude of seated bodhisattvas. Okay. Moving on. All right, we're going to end with the Muslim issue here. Muslim conquest brought on the final stage of the long decline of Buddhism in India. Buddhism was a proselytizing religion, which means people go and give sermons, or what we call sermons in Christian religion, like Islam, and two competitors did not get along well. Whereas the Muslims were able to ignore or come to terms with Hinduism, they attacked Buddhism and its institutions, especially the few remaining monasteries that were the heart of the faith. Already weakened by a revitalized Hinduism, Buddhist faith was now in the 12th century, wiped out in the land where it had originated. Its strong roots in the Javan kingdom of Sri Lanka, as well as in China, Korea, Japan, and much of Southeast Asia, guaranteed its continued existence, however. Okay. So we are done with that, and we're going to move into the Hindu doctrines. Okay, so we're looking good there on the questions. Good deal. So proceeding, the Hindu doctrines in the classical age. The doctrines of Hinduism stem from a great mass of unwritten tradition, but also from three written sources: the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Mahabharata. The Vedas are four lengthy epic poems that were originally brought to India by the Aryans, dealing with the relationships between the many gods and their human subjects. They relate tales of the god heroes who created the earth and all that lies in it. The most significant is the Rig Veda, which was written down in relatively modern times. It contains a great deal of information about the Aryan Indian gods and their relationships with humans. The chief deities are Indra and Varuna. As did most agrarian religions, the original version of Vedic Hinduism, often called Brahmanism, was almost entirely a religion of ritual and sacrifice, with priests, the Brahmins, playing the leading role. The Upanishads are a series of long and short philosophical speculations, apparently first. So before I move on, I'd like to go through these photos, and I have a question for you too. So Hindu god Vishnu, the god of preservation, is depicted with the consort Lakshmi riding the huge bird demon Garuda as it circles the universe in search of prey. So, I got a question that's been covered now, the picture. Short and sweet on the question. And this is question 7. Okay, now this one, you're actually going to have to write a little longer here. So at least write down the question. You can answer it later. Oops. Here we go. The doctrines of Hinduism come from which three sources? I think I just read those, so it's going to take a little longer, but get into it right now. I'll give you some time. So again, my funny guys, don't get into your, oh, it's San Diego, LA, and San Francisco. No, those are not the three sources. Okay, you think you're getting a hold on that one? Give you just a little bit more. All right. All right, let me get the eraser. Okay, so repeating, the doctrines of Hinduism come from which three sources? All right, let's go back to the material. We ended here. I described the photo, read the caption, so we should move on. Okay. Produced in the 8th century BCE, gradually they were expanded to number more than 100, with a body of poems that deal with the human dilemma of being alive on earth as a partial, incomplete being. The Upanishads are a long step forward from the relatively unsophisticated rituals and antidotes of the Vedas, which begins the tradition of involved speculation that became a characteristic of later Hindu thought. The supreme deities of all modern Hindus are Brahman, Vishnu, and Shiva. Although individuals may worship many gods, all Hindus believe in the paramount importance of these three gods. Brahman is the world spirit, source of all life and all objects in the universe, roughly equivalent to the Christian God the Father, but entirely impersonal. Hindus are generally subdivided into the devotees of either Vishnu or Shiva. Vishnu is the preserver, a sort of Christ figure without the ethical teachings. He or someone, sometimes she, the Hindu deities are often bisexual, has appeared in 9 incarnations, which means rebirths, thus far in world history. And there will be a 10th. The most popular of all Hindu gods, Vishnu, is particularly beloved in the form of Krishna, the instructor and protector of all humans. The last of the Hindu trinity is Shiva, the destroyer and also creator. Shiva is best appreciated as the god of becoming lord of both life and death. At times, he or she is depicted or shown as a beneficent bringer of joy. At other times, he is the ruthless and irresistible destroyer, making way for new life to come. The old Vedic Hinduism proved unable to match the appeal of these religions. Okay. Two people seeking a more personal and spiritually fulfilling experience. Some of these beliefs, and particularly the position of priests who interpreted them, the Brahmins, were challenged by the Buddhists and the Jains. Consequently, in the 500 years between Ashoka's reign and the end of Kushan Empire, Buddhism and Jainism attracted the allegiance of a large part of the population. As Buddhism gradually evolved into a supernatural religion, after its founder's death, Hinduism responded to the Buddhist challenge by developing a less formal and more speculative approach, question asking, to the mysteries of eternal life and the gods who ordained human life. The Upanishads and the Mahabharata are the embodiment of this response, which changed the old Vedic religion into something different. The Mahabharata is the world's longest poem. It contains about 200,000 lines, relating the exploits of the gods and some of their favorite heroes on earth. The most popular part, known by all the Hindus, is the Bhagavad Gita, a segment in which the god Krishna instructs a warrior, Arjuna, in what it means to be human, a human being who strives to do good and avoid evil. Here's this thing. Okay. So ending up here, to his fellows, this new Hinduism was capable of arousing or bringing forth strong adherents or following among ordinary souls by giving them a meaningful guide to moral and ethical belief. Hinduism in time evolved into Bhakti Hinduism, which produced many subdivisions or sects, each of which emphasized the individual's worship of one or more gods. All of these sects are notable for their tolerance towards others. In contrast to the historical Western religions and Islam, they do not assert or put forth that there is but one true path to heaven. Okay, so it's time for a question. Question 8. Easy peasy on this one. Short and sweet. Oops. Okay, we just talked about this, so you should answer this very easily. So, in time, Hinduism evolved into what? Don't say the Protestant faith or Lutheran church or Methodist, please. No funny stuff. See, even the thought. It's making me cough. Okie dokie. So like I said, that's a short one. So you should be able to get that. So eraser time. In time, Hinduism evolved into what? Okay. Back to the material. So we're here. We ended with the area here. So development of the caste system. By the end of the Gupta period, the caste system founded, the Aryan conquerors reigned supreme. It had grown ever more refined in its applications and more complex in its structure as time passed. Subcastes had multiplied and were determined by geographic, ethnic, and kinship factors, as well as by the traditional social and economic categories. Along with the restructured Hindu belief, caste had become one of the two defining factors in the lives of all Indians. At the bottom were the outcasts or untouchables, who were condemned to a marginal existence as beggars, buriers of the dead, and dealers in animal products that were thought to be polluting. Above them were hundreds of varieties of farmers, craftsmen, and merchants, as well as laborers, each of which constituted a more or less close grouping with its own unwritten rules of religious belief and social conduct. Although caste members tended to belong to a distinct occupation, caste membership could also differ according to the caste territory or doctrines. For example, members of the caste that specialized in credit and money lending in Calcutta were not members of the caste that dominated the same activity in Bombay or in Delhi. They could be seen as higher or lower in the intricate gradings of social prestige that the caste imposed. Although it was possible to raise one's status by marriage with a higher caste member, it was also possible to debase or lower oneself by marriage to a lower one. It seems that the impoverished or poor members of the high prestige caste who sought material advantage from marriage with lower but wealthy individuals attempted the usual rationalizations. All in all, such mixed marriages with their attendant changes of caste were rare in India, and the stratification of society, which commenced in Aryan times, grew even stronger. So it means the structure just grew stronger. That's the stratification. By about the 9th or 10th century CE, the system had become so entrenched or so strong as to be a fundamental pillar or support of the revitalized Hindu culture. It was the cement holding the subcontinent together, giving everyone a definite, easily comprehended place in society. Yet at the same time, the caste system created permanent barriers amongst individuals, separations that persist even today. The modern, okay, we'll go on, outlaws caste privilege and guarantees all Indians equality before the law. But the old categories continue, especially in the villages where about 75% of Indians still live. So I have a question on the caste system. Pencil. This is question 9. So 9 says the caste system became what to all Indians? So let me give you a few to do that. Okay, you think you got a hold on that? All right. All right, let me get the eraser. Repeating, the caste system became what to all Indians? All right, let me move on to the last part of the reading, going to the material. Last part will concentrate on social customs. Okay. Right. How did the Hindu masses organize their day-to-day lives? For Indians, as for most early agrarian or farming peoples, blood ties were the basis of social and economic life. The extended family was universal. In-laws and second and third generations all lived together in the same compound. The oldest male always exercised authority. Polygamy, the practice of having several wives, was common, as was concubinage, sexual servitude. So we all know about concubines. Children, especially the oldest sons, had an honored place and were often pampered. Females were clearly and unequivocally subservient, or let the males dominate them. Unequivocally means without question. Women were expected to be good wives and mothers and to let the husband decide everything that pertained to affairs outside of the home. Marriage was arranged early in life by the parents of the bride and the groom. As in most societies, marriage was primarily an economic and social affair. So as you see, the parents picked who you were going to marry, not you. No, oh, I fell in love with this guy at the 7-Eleven. No, not at all. So again, economic and social affair with the feelings of the individuals being distinctly secondary. So it was very common to say, eventually you'll fall in love with your husband or your wife. Ideally, the girl was betrothed or given to at about age 13 or 14. That's pretty young. I mean, I'm 18, but that's still too young. And given into the care of her much older husband soon after. The reality usually differed, however, as many families began to betroth children, preferably sons. Oh, that's interesting change. A barren wife would expect that her husband would take additional wives to ensure the continuation of the family name, much as among other Asian and African civilizations. So if the wife could not have children, whatever her physical problem was, it was not an issue for her husband to take other wives that could have babies so that can continue the family name. Divorce was rare among the upper castes. We know little about the others. Considerable evidence indicates that in early times, Hindu women, at least in the upper classes, had more freedoms than in other ancient societies. Interesting. The Rig Veda, for example, makes no mention of restricting women from public affairs, and women composed some of the numerous sacred texts. And that means they wrote many of the early sacred texts written by women. Wow, good for them. By the time of the Mahabharata epic, composed about 400 BCE, the female status had become inferior to that of the male. So unfortunately, things changed. The veiling and strict social, which means they have to wear a veil to not show their face, and strict social isolation of women among Hindus was reinforced with the Muslim conquest, because as you know, Muslims also have the women cover their faces. I mean, maybe you can see their eyes in some cases. From the time onward, the Hindu population began a much stricter seclusion of respectable women and treated them as a property of fathers and husbands. That's different now. In the United States, men are the property of the woman. The position of widows was especially pitiful or sad. The widow was expected to be in permanent mourning and never to remarry. She was looked on with disdain, even by her relatives, and as the bringer of bad luck. It is no wonder that some women choose to follow their dead husbands into voluntary death through sati, the ritual suicide of a wife after her husband's death. Actually, it seems few widows, even in the priestly caste that were supposed to be model to others, ever went so far in their devotion. So it says most of the women didn't do that. Okay, so let me check. I think we are done. Okay. Yep, that's it. Black screen there. Okay, so we go. There we go. I'm sorry. Hey, there I am. Okay, so we're done for this week. Thank you for my first week back. It was a lot of fun. And I look forward to talking to you for next week. So we're done for today and have a good week. Okay, thank you. All right.